everybody on the panel for a very, very enriching discussion. As everything during this conference and the conference itself, it has, of course, been much, much too short. I'm sure you would all enjoy another 5 days of conference that would also reflect the quantity of ideas and the quality of ideas we would have loved to present, because to getting to this very modest conference program, we have really had to brutally cut hundreds of excellent speakers and ideas. But you know what you got. You have been here for the last 3.5 days, most of you. And the encouraging news is it's not over yet. There will be more conferences, also Play the Game conferences, and we will go on raising these issues and go on attempting to empower athletes and everybody else in the room. My colleague mentioned to me this morning that this date today, the 16th of October, is a bit particular because it is 51 years ago that two African-American athletes were awarded with the gold and bronze medal in the 200-meter sprint at the Olympics in Mexico, and raised their fists in black leather gloves as a very, very strong signal of protest and against and hope for society. I don't know whether the athletes gathered here today had leather gloves, or whether it might be silk gloves with an iron fist inside. But I note that today a group of athlete organizations actually issued a statement, wrote an open letter to Dr. Thomas Bach. That's not the Thomas Bach that is with us here, but the president of the International Olympic Committee, who should, of course, have been here. Athletes Canada, Athleten Deutschland, the Athletes Advisory Council of the US OPC, New Zealand Athletes Federation, and Global Athlete has written to Thomas Bach today and asked the IOC to take their own commitment to human rights seriously, to put it into praxis. They suggest very specifically that the IOC includes a phrase in the Olympic Charter saying the Olympic movement is committed to respecting all internationally recognized human rights and shall strive to promote the protection of these rights. Then the athletes write, I think I can safely say that Play the Game 2019 is behind it. If there is one, I will not, I will only spend about 35 minutes resuming the conference, and so I have not time for everything. So I'll just briefly say that if two takeaways from myself is, it is evident that we have a vibrant athlete community at the international level. And that gives me a lot of hope. It's also evident that strengthening athlete representation, strengthening athlete power is not easy peasy. It's a quite complicated exercise with many dilemmas. Personally, I look forward to working on a day-by-day basis with it over the next 3 years, thanks to the EU grant I've previously mentioned. We will have to keep the money in the project for ourselves because the EU does not allow that we hand it out to anyone. But I can assure that the spiritual energy of the project will be shared with as many stakeholders as we can reasonably reach out to, and that we seek as broad a consultancy as possible in the athlete environment and elsewhere, so that it can be a common engagement in trying to identify some of the proposals and solutions that we need to realize. My second takeaway, which I think became as clear as it could be during this session, is that we are dealing with very, very difficult issues that will not easily come to an end. It should not come to me as a surprise after 20 years, but I still get a little bit surprised that to realize that we are very, very far from convincing solutions when it comes to anti-doping, whistleblower protection, match fixing, sexual abuse. One of the things that it requires to solve these problems is government engagement, lawmakers, administrators. How many governments are represented here? I think one, my own. This has been perhaps the only weakness of hosting the conference here in the US compared to in Europe, because actually we had, I don't know, 30, 40 governments from Europe represented when we held our last conference, and widespread cooperation with the EU and the Council of Europe. I will later, to the Americans, explain the difference between those two organizations. And another notably absent group, and that is nothing new. Wherever we go, we can count on the international federations being and the national governing bodies being largely absent. We are very pleased that the athletes representatives of the IOC came here. They said that they would go home and work for a stronger IOC representation at the next Play the Game conference, and I think that's a very good idea. You may feel sometimes, many of you who work for sports integrity, that the road is really long. I think there is consolation to find in at least two elements of it. One is that if we do not work with these problems, if we just let them go, if we just say, I'm too tired, Netflix, whatever, then we fail to be civilized. We may do very little. We may be very insufficient in what we're doing, but our efforts are an expression of civilization. The second is that when you get used to the thought that you will not come to the end of the road, you can mentally develop a certain enjoyment of the road to the goal that you may never reach. From my youth, I have been very inspired by a poem by the American poet Robert Frost. I will only quote one of the verse. The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. That is a very, very beautiful poem, I think, and I think we have some woods to go through, and some snow now and then, although it's fortunately not coming right on the corner. I know that you now think that after applauding that many speakers over that many days, you deserve a round of applause. But to get that, you will have to do another effort, and that is to come to the cocktail drink at 7:30. We will meet in the room next to the room where we had lunch, same section of the hotel. We will spend some time chatting, relaxing, then we will go for dinner, then we will see what happens. I'd like to thank you all for your commitment over these days. Thank you.